Welcome to the Daily Dispatch. Today we'll discuss if India is capable of producing enough jobs for its population, as it is set to take the mantle of the largest population in the world. We'll also tell you about the shrinking of large-scale manufacturing in Pakistan for the third month and what it means. We're here to give you the news and to help you infer the world around you. I'm Tayyaba Nisar, and here is your Daily Dispatch. Yesterday, we gave you news of China experiencing a shrink in its population for the very first time in decades. Today, we'll tell you about the country that is likely to overtake China as the most populous country in a few months, India. With India becoming the world's most populous country with a population of over more than 1.4 billion, it is being speculated by some quarters that it will be the next market and destination for product assembly for the multinational corporations. More so against the backdrop of supply chain issues in China after 3 years of the stringent COVID rules and protests that erupted in the largest iPhone assembly plant in Chengdu, causing a shortage of the iPhone 14 Pros during the holiday season. India has been planning to replace China as the factory of the world by rolling out generous incentives and including subsidies for the companies that wish to migrate from China. Even though many financial analysts predict India's GDP to double the current levels by 2030, is it really possible for India to overtake China as the factory of the world? More importantly, will India be able to create enough jobs to cater to its massive population boom? With the working population standing at 900 million in India, which is expected to hit more than 1 billion in a decade, India isn't creating enough job opportunities for the millions of young graduates. Out of this number, there's only a 46% labor force participation rate, in comparison to China, which is 68%. Moreover, according to the World Bank data, the female participation is only 19%, which was lower than the 26% recorded in 2005. Now, despite hosting the largest youth population in the world, India's unemployment rate stands at 8.3%, according to the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. On the contrary, China's unemployment rate stands at 4.8%. Now, due to a lack of quality education, India's agricultural sector hosts more than 45% of this workforce. However, McKinsey predicted that by 2030, the country needs to have jobs other than the agricultural jobs, including in the manufacturing and construction sector, among the others, to be able to increase the employment opportunities for the young population. Even though the shift from the Chinese market by giants like Apple has been giving India a boost in its progress, factories will still only account for 14% of the total GDP, presenting a dire situation for the Indian policymakers. Next on the dispatch. According to the latest data provided by the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics, the PBS, the output of large-scale manufacturing industries decreased by 5.49% for November 2022 when compared with the last year's figures at the same time, while the overall large-scale manufacturing sector showed a decline of 3.58% during July to November period. The manufacturing sectors which showed a shrinking in their output are food, textile, pharmaceuticals, cement, and automobiles, among the others. However, the production increased in some products like leather, garments, football, and furniture. The economic experts attribute the shrinking industrial output to growing energy prices, the rising cost of raw materials, the lack of availability of the foreign exchange, and a contraction in consumer demand due to inflation. A weakening rupee has also increased the import bill for the raw materials and the inputs for the industrialists. Now, the large-scale manufacturing sector contributes around 10% of Pakistan's gross domestic product and accounts for more than 70% of the sector's share and is one of the biggest contributors to Pakistan's exports. A decrease in output by the large-scale industries has created fears of layoffs as industries try to cut the costs. According to the Pakistan Economic Survey, the unemployment rate is already high in Pakistan at 6.3%. Moreover, it also means if this trend of negative growth persists, it will exacerbate Pakistan's trade and fiscal deficit crisis, further increasing the inflation and weakening Pakistan's currency. Now, as Pakistan grapples with multiple economic challenges, it is trying to secure the next tranche of the IMF's loan to replenish its foreign exchange reserves and temporarily address the issue of fiscal deficit. Now let's talk about defense cooperation. Japan and India are conducting their first joint air exercises in a bid to contain China's growing influence, both militarily and economically. The 11-day joint air drills, which will involve 8 Japanese and 4 Indian fighter jets along with a transport aircraft and a refueling tanker, respectively, were first decided during the 2+2 meeting in November 2019 between Japan and India's foreign and defense ministers, and were subsequently delayed due to the COVID pandemic. Recently, Japan has been bolstering defense ties with multiple countries after it decided to upgrade its defense GDP to 2% by 2027. Now, Japan has recently inked a defense deal with the United Kingdom and agreed to expand the Mutual Defense Treaty to attacks conducted in or from space with the United States. India and Japan are both members of the Quad, the Quadrilateral Group Alliance, with Australia and the United States that aim to counter China. Moreover, a shift in the policy has been witnessed since the Asia-Pacific region started being seen in the larger geopolitical contour of the Indo-Pacific region. We'll now tell you about the economic fragmentation, which could cost as high as 7% of the global output, according to the International Monetary Fund's report, The Geo-Economic Fragmentation and the Future of Multilateralism. The forecast gets more bleak if the cost of technological decoupling is included, which will nearly double the cost, 12% of the world's GDP. The world is already seeing signs of increasing technological rivalry in the semiconductor industry, especially between the US and China. The International Financial Institution fears the world is facing the specter of a new Cold War that could see the world fragment into rival economic blocs, despite the urgent need to increase cooperation on multiple fronts to deal with the shared challenges. Now, economic fragmentation is likely to affect emerging and developing economies the most, which will be unable to reap the benefits of the technological spillovers needed for economic growth, climate change, public service delivery, and bridging the gulf between the advanced technology haves and have-nots. The world already faces a global economic slowdown, rising inflation, climate change-induced disasters, and slow post-COVID recovery. And economic fragmentation will only exacerbate these challenges. And lastly, Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg was temporarily detained by the German police for staging a protest against the expansion of the Garzweiler open-cast lignite mine of Germany's utility RWE to Lützerath coal mine. The expansion also means the demolition of the Lützerath village. Now, Thunberg joined the protesters at the site last week and has been seen at the site for over a week, tweeting updates on her climate strike as well. Germany introduced the legislation to curb its greenhouse gas emissions in 2019 and set the reduction objectives for 2030. However, emissions saw an upward rise in the recent years following the COVID-19 pandemic. This rise was caused by the state's attempt to compensate for the energy production in the absence of the Russian gas, first due to the decline in supply during the pandemic, and later due to the sanctions and restrictions in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. At the current rate, Germany would have to reduce its carbon emissions by 6% annually to achieve its objective of greenhouse gas emissions and neutrality by 2045. However, this seems challenging, as the energy production sector's reliance on the coal increases in the wake of sanctions and caps on Russian imports. Now, Thunberg expressed her disappointment at one of the biggest polluters of our planet. While Germany invests heavily in the renewable energy sources, the immediate energy needs make the prospect of increasing coal production an attractive perspective, even as it sets the country back on its own emission neutrality goals. That's all, folks. We'd be happy to receive your feedback and suggestions. We'll be back tomorrow with more bite-sized news that keeps you up to date with what's going on in the country, the region, and the globe. I'm Tayyaba Nisar Khan, and this was your Daily Dispatch.